After 15 years, the infertile CEO falls to his knees. Give me a baby, and I'll give you my entire fortune. Welcome, dear friends. I hope you're all doing well today. I'm James, your storyteller, and it's a true blessing to have you here with me for another unforgettable journey. Before we dive in, let's take a sacred pause, just a moment to invite grace into our hearts. Dear God, thank you for gathering us here today. May this story overflow with hope, healing, and love. Please bless each listener with peace that surpasses understanding and joy that lingers long after the story ends. Amen. Before we begin, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for each and every one of you. Your unwavering support keeps this channel alive. Recently, others have been copying my work without permission, but I know I can count on my incredible community. You've always had my back, and I believe you always will. We're in this together. If you're standing with me, leave a comment below and let me know. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It means the world. With your support, we'll keep building something beautiful. Now get ready, this story is one I know you won't forget. Let's begin. Marie stood beneath the dusky glow of the setting sun, her curls fluttering in the wind like quiet songs from the past. Each strand moved with purpose, like memories dancing back into her life. Though the sunlight kissed her skin with warmth, something colder curled within her. The kind of chill only one man had ever left behind. That man had vanished 15 years ago, taking her heart with him. She had stood on the edge of forever, ready to leap into love, only to discover he had disappeared. Richard, the man she had trusted more than anyone, vanished without a goodbye, leaving her clutching the broken echoes of dreams they once whispered under moonlight. She spent endless nights in the quiet corner of her apartment, sobbing into tear-soaked pillows, whispering his name into the silence. She wondered if love was supposed to break you like this. If being left by someone who once made you feel whole was just a cruel trick played by fate. In time, when she feared her soul would shatter completely, she found sanctuary in her art. With trembling hands and paint-stained fingers, she turned her heartbreak into color. Each canvas was a confession. Every brushstroke, a letter to the man who never returned. The world watched her rise, an artist of elegance and mystery. Her purple lipstick became a badge of courage, her full lips shaped in determination. Her hair, styled with grace, framed eyes that spoke of storms and survival. But no one saw the shadows that lingered beneath those eyes. Behind her curated beauty lived a woman who rebuilt herself with trembling resolve. She had stitched her heart together from the shards of love lost, not knowing that across the miles, the man who broke her was still haunted by the sound of her voice and the softness of her touch. Richard lived in a palace of glass and marble, a monument to power. Yet every night, the silence around him grew louder. He would pour himself vintage scotch and sit beside floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at a city that blinked back with cold indifference. Hidden in his desk drawer was a single photograph. Marie at 22, holding his hand, her curls resting on his shoulder like they belonged there. 15 years had passed, but the ache she left behind hadn't faded. If anything, time only sharpened it. Every deal he closed, every empire he built, was a pale consolation for the sound of her laughter or the way her fingers once brushed paint onto his skin. She had breathed color into his darkness, and he had walked away believing it was the right thing to do. When the doctor told him he would never father children, his world crumbled, and in the rubble, he made a choice: leave her before she became shackled to a man with nothing to offer. He thought it was love. He told himself it was mercy, not cowardice. But in truth, he hadn't just left her. He had destroyed something sacred. She had loved him despite the hidden scars he carried, and no woman since could reach the place she once held. They tried, but his soul never bent to anyone else. Because Marie wasn't just his past. She was the air he breathed, the music his life lost. In his loneliest hours, he whispered her name into the dark, hoping maybe, just maybe, the wind might carry it back to her. He never really moved on. Luxury, legacy, and headlines became his armor, but none of it could replace the gentle way Marie once held his jaw, or the way her eyes saw the man behind the mask. A man not broken, but simply in need of love. Now, years later, with regret coiled tight in his chest like a serpent, he found himself asking impossible questions. Could he find her? Would she forgive him? Did she think of him when a breeze touched her face? Or when old songs played on rainy nights? He didn't have answers, only a vow. If life ever allowed him to see Marie again, not as the boy who ran, but as the man who remained in love, he would kneel before her and beg, "Give me a baby, and I'll give you my entire fortune." That night, the city beyond Richard's windows dimmed into quiet stars. Then his phone buzzed. One message that fractured his world. "The results are in. Come in tomorrow." He didn't sleep. He paced. He poured a drink and forgot it untouched. He watched the moon drag itself across the sky. His thoughts swam in a single truth. He had believed he was barren for 15 years and accepted it like a curse. Dawn came with no comfort, just a storm swelling behind his ribs. At the doctor's office, the same man who had once crushed his hopes now trembled with a new truth in his hands. "It worked, Richard. You're no longer infertile." Richard didn't smile, didn't speak. The words cut deeper than any scalpel. Not joy, but hollowness consumed him. Because miracles meant nothing when the only person you'd give them to was no longer there to receive them. He whispered her name, just her name, as if it might pull him back from this unreal moment. Marie. Her photo, worn and faded, burned against his chest like a brand. This was the miracle he once prayed for, and now it tasted like ash. She came alive in his mind, not as a memory, but as she might be today, strong, still painting grief into beauty, still smiling with that quiet ache only he ever understood. He could have given her this, a child, a legacy born of their love, but all he saw now were the ruins of what they never had. If he had stayed, if he had told her the truth, if he had loved her enough to trust her with his pain, maybe they could have survived. The what-if screamed louder than the doctor's congratulations. And when Richard left the office, it wasn't the powerful CEO who stepped into the elevator, but a man unraveling from within. He canceled everything. Meetings, deals, calls. Nothing mattered now. Only Marie. Only the ache in his soul that echoed her name like a sacred prayer. Some nights he sat on the bed, others by the window, her photo against his lips like a lifeline. He stared into that young face, trying to imagine the woman she had become. Would she hate him? Walk away? Would she still remember? Desperation bloomed like wildfire. Not for a child, not for legacy, but for her. He didn't want just any woman. He didn't want heirs for the sake of wealth. He wanted Marie, their child, her laugh, her eyes, her soul beside his again. And now fate dangled the dream before him, mocking him. You could have had it all, if only you stayed. He gripped his hair, chest burning, whispering her name over and over. He thought of her under that rainstorm all those years ago, of how she kissed him with defiant love, of how all she ever asked was honesty, and how he gave her silence instead. Now he had the power to give her everything she once dreamed of, yet no hand to reach for in joy, no arms to hold him, just regret. That night, while the city carried on, Richard dropped to his knees on cold marble floors, clutching her photo, tears falling unchecked, and spoke aloud what should have been said long ago. "I should have stayed. I should have fought. I should have told you." He didn't just feel guilt. He felt the cruelty of timing. A man once too broken to offer life was now whole. But the woman he longed for lived only in memories. The doctor's voice rang again. "You can be a father now." But what good was fatherhood when the only woman he wanted to share it with was out of reach? Maybe forever. He had everything, money, power, status. But none of it could buy back Marie. Without her, it all meant nothing. All night he lay awake, heart raw, eyes burning. And by morning, he knew one truth. He couldn't go on like this. If there was even the slightest chance she still remembered him, still wondered why he vanished, still painted him into her art, then he had to find her, not just to explain, not just to apologize, but to beg for forgiveness, for one last chance, for the future they were robbed of, because now the only thing that stood between them wasn't his body, but time, and whether her heart could ever open to the man who once walked away. But gently, as if afraid the sound might wake something inside her that she wasn't ready to face. The vest trembled slightly in her hands as she set it on the windowsill, the pale blooms a stark contrast to the storm behind her eyes. She stood there for minutes, or maybe hours, watching the city breathe, thinking about how love, real love, was never as clean as the stories promised. It bled, it bruised, it left marks you didn't even know were there until someone touched the scar just right. Marie brushed her fingers across the petals, soft and wet with the ghost of morning. The note lay beside the vase like a weight, small but impossible to ignore. His words haunted her, not because they were poetic, but because they were finally honest. I was a coward, but I'm still yours. She wasn't ready to respond. Maybe she never would be. But something had cracked open, an ache too persistent to ignore, a whisper of a love that had refused to die, even buried under years of silence. That night Marie didn't cry. She wrote. Just one sentence in her old journal, the one she hadn't opened in years, its pages still scented faintly of ink and lavender. Maybe some stories don't end. They just wait until both hearts are ready to tell the rest. She could have passed out from it, grief, rage, or just exhaustion, but she let it bleed instead. That day at work, another bouquet arrived. The next day, another. And the day after that, again. Each came with a note. Not grand, not poetic, just broken honesty, scrawled in ink that trembled with regret. You once made me believe I was more than money. You loved me when I couldn't love myself. I missed the way your eyes softened when you said my name. Let me make one more memory with you. At first, Marie threw them away. Pride too sharp, pain still raw. But as the days passed, she began to keep the notes, stacking them on her desks like torn-out pages from a love story that refused to end. On the seventh day, she read them all, curled on her couch, tears spotting the paper, his words washed over her like a confession. Too late to change the past, but too beautiful to ignore. She didn't want to admit it, not even to herself, but something inside her ached, not just for closure, maybe for a beginning. That night, long after the city had gone quiet, when only the hum of distant traffic remained, a knock echoed through her apartment. It was too late for neighbors, too early for deliveries. She stood in the hallway, hand on the doorknob, heart pounding like it remembered something her mind had buried. When she opened the door, there he was, not in a suit, not in polished shoes or the armor of wealth, just jeans and a gray shirt, wind-tossed hair, a beard that hadn't seen a razor in days. His eyes were red, not from liquor or lack of sleep, but from longing. Marie, he said. Her name came out like a prayer, a plea. She didn't answer. Her throat was a battlefield. He took a trembling breath. Then for the first time in his prideful life, he dropped to his knees, hands clasped like a man begging forgiveness at the altar. I can't sleep, he whispered, voice cracking. I can't eat. I see your face in every stranger. I smell your perfume in places you've never been. I tried to move on, to bury the pain in work, but nothing fills the silence you left behind. Marie's grip on the door tightened, knuckles white. Her voice came low, not cold, not angry, just tired. Why are you here, Richard? His eyes glistened. Because I realized I never wanted children more than I wanted you. And now, if there's even the faintest chance, I want both, with you. Her breath caught. He inched forward on his knees like every move shredded him. Give me a baby, Marie, he said, voice trembling, and I'll give you everything. Not just the company, not just my fortune. I'll give you my name again, my time, my soul, even what's left of this battered heart, because you deserve it. You always did. She stared at him, not stunned by the words but by the naked vulnerability in his eyes. This man who once ruled boardrooms now knelt before her like she held the power to save or destroy him. And you think a baby fixes what you broke? She asked, voice soft but sharp as silk over steel. No, he said immediately. A child can't fix the past, but it can build a future. And I want that. With you. Even if you say no. Even if all I get is a chance to stand beside you and prove I've changed. I'll take it. The air shimmered between them, thick with memory, with tension, with unsaid dreams. She looked at him and saw not the man who left, but the one who once painted her walls at midnight, who cried when her dog died, who kissed her knuckles every morning and swore she was his home. She stepped back, heart a drumbeat against her ribs. "Come in," she whispered. He hesitated, then rose, slowly, as if standing took more strength than lifting an empire. Inside, her apartment was dim, soft, filled with warmth. She moved to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water, hands steady now, as if something inside her had decided to listen. Not forgive, not forget. Just listen. When she handed him the glass, their fingers brushed. A jolt passed between them, unspoken, undeniable. "I'm not promising anything," she said, meeting his eyes, "but I'm listening." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "That's more than I deserve." She looked away, but a soft smile tugged at her lips, and the distance between them felt just a little smaller. They sat on the couch, awkward at first, like strangers relearning an old language. But when he spoke, it wasn't about business or doctors or time lost. It was about her off-key singing in the shower, her love of cinnamon rolls from the bodega, the way she lit up at street art. He remembered everything. And she listened. With every word, the cracks in her heart didn't heal, but they softened, just enough to let something warm back in. As midnight crept close, they didn't move. They just sat, past and present tangled in silence. When she looked at him again, really looked, she didn't see the man who walked away. She saw the one who came back. And for the first time in years, she wondered, not about what was, but about what could still be. The silence between them lingered, not empty, but sacred. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. "I don't know what to do with all these memories, Richard," she whispered. "They're everywhere." He looked at her, then said gently, "Maybe we don't have to erase them. Maybe tonight we just let them be." She sighed, shoulders slumping under the weight of everything she'd carried. "One night," she murmured. "That's all I can give." He didn't nod, didn't smile. He accepted it like something holy. She stood, trailing her fingers across the fireplace mantel as she walked back toward the couch. He followed. They sat again, close. Her body leaned into his like her soul remembered where it once belonged. When his arm slid around her, it wasn't possessive, it was protective. Her head rested on his chest, and for the first time in forever, he exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath since the day she left. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Her fingers found the fabric of his shirt, his chin touched the crown of her head, and the fire crackled gently, wrapping them in warmth. When he finally kissed her, first on the forehead, then her temple, then just shy of her lips, he waited. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward. The kiss was slow, reverent. It didn't beg. It wept. When they parted, her voice was a whisper. "Why does it still hurt?" "Because it mattered," he said, and it gutted her, because it was true. Without a word, she rose and walked toward her bedroom. At the doorway, she paused. "If you walk in here, Richard, it's not forgiveness. It's not forgetting. It's just, for one night, I want to remember what it felt like to be yours." His voice cracked. "I never stopped being yours." She turned. He followed. What they shared wasn't passion. It was history, ache, love that never fully died. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if touching sacred ground. Her tears mixed with his kisses. His hands trembled as they worshipped her like a prayer long withheld. He whispered truths into her skin. "I missed you. I need you. You're still the only woman I've ever loved." And in the hush that followed, her body curled into his. The fire's glow reached down the hall, flickering across tangled sheets and skin. They didn't sleep. They just held each other. Quiet, still, real. Sometime in the night, he kissed her head and whispered, "If this is goodbye, thank you for letting me hold you one more time." Her reply was soft, fragile. It's not goodbye, but it's not a promise either. He nodded and understood. When morning came, the light was pale and pink. Marie stirred first. She turned to him, already awake, already watching her like she was something holy. No words passed. She sat up, brushed her hair back, wrapped the sheet around herself. He reached out, then paused, unsure. She leaned in and kissed his cheek. "Whatever happens next," she whispered, "this night was real." He nodded, eyes wet. And it was. Water, his hand never straying too far from hers, as if letting go might break the spell of this fragile beginning. Marie sipped slowly, her fingers brushing the rim of the glass. The silence between them, no longer awkward or heavy, but sacred, like an unspoken vow. They didn't talk about the past, not about the years lost, the letters unsent, or the bitterness that once sat like a stone in her chest. That would come later, in time, when wounds could be examined without tearing them open. Tonight wasn't about answers. It was about presence. Richard sat beside her, not touching at first, just close enough for her to feel the heat of him. Eventually, her head found his shoulder, and his arm curled gently around her back like muscle memory. They stayed like that as the city darkened outside the windows, the street lamps flickering on one by one, the world moving forward in quiet increments. Marie felt her eyelids grow heavy, not from exhaustion but from peace, a rare, unfamiliar kind of calm that settled over her like a warm quilt. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like. She didn't know what she and Richard would be, or how they'd navigate this sudden, extraordinary shift in their lives. But for tonight, it was enough that he was here, that she was not alone, that inside her, a tiny flicker of life grew stronger, held in the quiet certainty of love rediscovered. Not perfect, not clean, but real. And real, she thought as her fingers curled over her belly again, was more than enough. Water tucked a blanket around her legs like she was the most precious thing he had ever held. Then he sat beside her, cradling her hand, tracing the lines of her palm as if they were a map to something sacred. And when she fell asleep, exhausted by emotion, he didn't move. He stayed. He watched her. He whispered to the tiny life within her, "I'm your dad," his fingers gently brushing Marie's stomach. "And I promise, little one, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for every second I wasn't there. You're already everything to me." In that moment, he didn't feel like the man who once walked away. He felt like the man who had finally found his way back home. Richard didn't sleep that night. Not really. He remained on the couch beside Marie, her form curled gently under the blanket, his fingertips never straying far from her hand. His eyes moved between her peaceful face and the soft swell of her belly. The world felt quieter now, as if time had bent around them, offering a hush from the noise, the regrets, the heartbreak they had known. Morning sunlight slipped through the blinds, casting golden ribbons across the walls. Still, Richard didn't move, except to press a careful kiss to the back of her hand and whisper again to the child he hadn't yet met, but already felt woven into the fabric of his soul. When Marie stirred awake, her lashes fluttering and breath catching in that tiny gasp of returning from dreams, she found him just where she'd left him, watching her like she was the most fragile, most precious thing in his world. "You didn't sleep," she whispered, her voice soft with sleep. He shook his head and gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "I couldn't. I didn't want to miss a single second of this." That was the beginning, not with grand gestures or champagne promises, but in the stillness of early morning. In the way he looked at her like she was home. Days passed like dreams stitched together by careful hands. And when Richard asked her to move in, not out of obligation, not pressured, but with quiet, honest hope, Marie said yes. Not because everything was fixed, but because she wanted to believe healing could begin. His mansion stood tall at the city's edge, grand yet strangely tender. When she walked through the doors, the scent of polished wood, the echo of high ceilings, and the gentle flutter of curtains felt less like arrival and more like returning. She paused in the doorway, bags in hand, wide-eyed, as if she were stepping into another life. Richard reached for her hand. "You belong here, Marie. You and our baby. This place. It's always been empty without you." And so, she stayed. The weeks that followed unfolded gently. Richard changed in ways he hadn't thought himself capable of. He canceled business trips once deemed untouchable, rescheduled board meetings to be at prenatal appointments. Mornings began with breakfast made by his hands, sometimes messy pancakes, sometimes fruit arranged with near-obsessive precision. Evenings ended with foot massages and whispered thank yous to her swollen feet for carrying their child. They strolled through gardens where roses bloomed and wind hummed lullabies. At night, he read to her belly, childhood stories, dreams for their baby's life, fears he had never shared with anyone else. And Marie watched him with a heart that swelled and ached, because even as she wanted to believe this could last, the scars of the past still whispered. She had trusted him once, loved him deeply, and lost herself when he left. What if this was just a beautiful moment? What if, when reality returned, his love faded again? There were nights she couldn't sleep, lying with his arms wrapped around her, listening to the steady rhythm of his breath, wondering if love this perfect could really be hers to keep. And Richard saw it, in the tension in her shoulders, in the way her smile sometimes hesitated, in the flicker in her eyes when he promised forever. One night moonlight silvered the bed, and he turned to her, cupping her face between his palms. "You don't believe me yet," he said softly, "and I understand why." Marie looked away, shame knotting in her chest. "I want to. I really do. But every time I let my guard down, I remember what it felt like when you walked away. I remember lying in silence with nothing but pieces of what we were." He kissed her forehead, her temple, the tears on her cheeks. "Marie, I'm not that man anymore. That man was afraid. That man didn't know what he wanted. That man thought love was something he didn't deserve. But now I know. My purpose isn't building empires or winning contracts. It's loving you, loving our child. That's it. That's all." "I'm still afraid," she whispered. "Then we'll be afraid together," he said. "But we won't run. Not anymore." The moon watched over them as he held her through the night. He didn't expect her fear to vanish, but he showed up for her, in every breath, in every quiet moment. He started a journal the next morning, leather-bound, handwritten, letters to my child. Marie found it one day, left open on his desk. She hadn't meant to read it, but the words reached out like warmth. "The first time I heard your heartbeat, I fell in love. The second time, I cried. You're not even here yet, and already you've made me a better man. I hope you have your mother's strength and her smile. I hope you feel how deeply, endlessly loved you are." Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from something she thought she had lost. Hope. Richard found her reading. Instead of embarrassment, he smiled and pulled her into his arms. "You and this little one are the only things that matter now." She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of home, and slowly the shadows began to fade. Marie stood in the nursery doorway, her hands resting over her belly's gentle curve. Richard was kneeling on the hardwood floor, paintbrush in hand, streaks of pale mint green staining his shirt. The once bare room now shimmered with warmth. "I know it's not perfect yet," he said, brushing his forehead with a paint-smeared wrist, "but I want every inch of this room to feel like love." "It already does," she whispered. In that moment, Richard's transformation was so complete it stole her breath. The man who once ruled boardrooms now knelt on the floor, building a life, a future, one brushstroke at a time. Not less powerful, just more human, more present. He still ran a company, but he also practiced baby swaddling on teddy bears, sang lullabies off-key, argued over which shade of white was calming, and measured crib placement with a laser level. And always, at the heart of everything, her. "You make me want to be more," he told her one night, pulling her into his lap, his voice a hush. "Not for the world, not for image, just for you, for us." She kissed him through tears, feeling the trembling honesty in his touch. That night he didn't make love to her with urgency. He worshipped her. His lips traced every line of her body with reverence. When he moved inside her, it was with a tenderness that shook her soul. "You're the reason I know what love feels like," he whispered. "And this child, this life we're bringing, it's the most sacred gift I've ever been given." Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets, skin to skin, hearts beating as one. His hand never left her belly. "I'll never miss a moment," he whispered. "I'll never let you go again." Weeks passed. Richard's phone rang less. Meetings shortened. Priorities shifted. He no longer chased power for validation. He found it in Marie's laughter, in the flutter of tiny kicks beneath her skin, in bedtime story dreams and whispered promises. One evening, as stars scattered the sky, he turned to her on the balcony and said quietly, wonder in his eyes, "You changed everything, Marie. Not by force, not by asking, just by being you. You reminded me of the boy I used to be, before the world told me to be hard." Empire could ever compare to the legacy they were now writing, one not carved in boardrooms or built on profit margins, but whispered into the quiet moments of shared glances, midnight feedings, soft prayers, and promises sealed in gentle kisses. Their baby stirred beside them, letting out a soft sigh, and both of them looked down with the kind of awe that never fades, the kind that only deepens with every breath, every cry, every tiny miracle. Richard bent down and scooped her into his arms, holding her like the most sacred treasure in the world, because she was. Marie leaned against him, her hand resting over his heart, and for a long, beautiful while, none of them moved. There were no words needed, just the hush of the ocean, the warmth of the fading sun, and the bond that now tied them forever. Richard turned his face slightly, whispering into Marie's hair, "This is what I was made for. Not money, not power. This." Marie smiled, her eyes full of unshed tears. "We were made for this," she replied softly. "All of it. The pain, the falling apart, the finding each other again. Every step brought us here. And in that sacred stillness, wrapped in salt air and golden light, the past fell away. The grief, the loss, the regrets. They were not forgotten, but they no longer held power. What mattered now was the future they held in their hands, tender, precious, and radiant with promise. They walked back toward the house slowly, barefoot in the sand, their daughter cradled gently between them, the waves washing away their old selves behind them. Each step forward was a step into a new life, a life built not on what they had, but on who they had become together. Love had rewritten their story,